The morning air up on Oak Haven Ridge is something you just can't replicate. It's got that sharp, clean scent of pine and fresh lake mist, and I was just standing there on the porch of my grandpa's old cabin, sipping coffee, feeling that perfect peace. It was the first time I'd been up here in almost 5 years, since my uncle passed and left me the place, and I was finally going to spend a full summer getting it back into shape. But that peace? It got absolutely shredded when Eleanor Vance came storming up the gravel path, clipboard clutched like a medieval shield, her face set in that rigid mask of self-appointed authority. "You, sir, need to vacate the premises immediately." She jabbed a manicured finger toward me, the chrome on her smartwatch catching the sun. Her voice, thin and piercing, cut right through the quiet. "I've already notified our community patrol. This is restricted private land, HOA members only, and you are clearly neither." I almost choked on my coffee. Ha! I just stood there, leaning against a rough-hewn cedar post, letting the absurdity of it wash over me. I mean, the fury in her eyes was genuine, though. She wasn't just playing the part of the Ridge Warden, she was it, in her own mind. Nearby cabin curtains twitched, because of course they did. Eleanor's drama was clearly the local morning news. "Patrol! Get up here now!" She barked into the watch, her tone escalating. "We have an unauthorized vagrant refusing to comply with the association's directives." I took a slow sip, just watching the sweat start to bead on her forehead. The truth I held, tucked neatly into the satchel hanging on my shoulder, felt heavy, almost mischievous. It was the kind of truth that doesn't just win an argument, it collapses the entire house of cards someone has spent decades building. I knew I wasn't a vagrant or a trespasser. I knew exactly whose land this was and who was actually trespassing. It took maybe 7 minutes for 2 official-looking vehicles to roll up, not HOA security, but actual county sheriff's rangers, their amber lights strobing against the dense green background. Eleanor waved at them like a distraught lighthouse keeper, shouting, "That's him! The squatter! He's violating every single Oak Haven bylaw!" The rangers, a grizzled older guy named Sergeant Reynolds, and a much younger, slightly uncomfortable deputy, exchanged a look before walking toward us. "Ma'am, do you have any official verification for these claims?" Reynolds asked, his voice calm, but you could tell he was already tired. Eleanor shoved her clipboard at him, a chaotic mess of photocopied rules and what looked like hastily scribbled signatures from board members. "The Oak Haven Summit Association owns this entire crest. Ranger," she declared, puffing out her chest, "he's in breach of the residency clause, the maintenance clause, and the general decency clause, I'm sure." I decided to let her finish digging. Reynolds turned to me, his hand hovering near his belt, the universal gesture for, "Let's keep this calm, buddy." "Sir, can you explain your connection to this cabin?" Eleanor shrieked, cutting him off. "He has none. He needs to be arrested for trespassing." I finally lowered my coffee mug, my voice coming out low and steady, a stark contrast to her screeching. "Sergeant Reynolds, before we go any further, you might want to review what's inside this envelope." I unhooked my satchel and handed him a thick, sealed manila folder. Her smirk, that terrible, entitled little thing, wavered as Reynolds slowly flipped through the pages. His eyebrows went up, then locked down on Eleanor. She actually tried to snatch the papers back, but he stopped her with a slight, firm movement of his arm. "Ma'am," Reynolds began, choosing his words with deliberate, painful slowness. "According to these county-certified deeds, it appears this property, and frankly, a considerable portion of the surrounding forest and lake frontage, belongs to him." Eleanor's jaw slackened. That's impossible," she whispered, her voice failing her. I finally stepped down onto the gravel path, meeting her wide, panicked eyes. My own voice was as calm as the lake shimmering in the distance. "You've been screaming at the wrong man, Eleanor." She backed away a step, voice trembling now. "It's a forgery." "He forged these." Reynolds didn't even acknowledge her. He just radioed something in, reading off a parcel number. The young deputy leaned in close to me, murmuring, "Sir, this file, it lists you as the sole owner of the entire Oak Haven tract. We're talking hundreds of acres of forest, streams, and this whole ridge. That's absurd." Eleanor shot back, the color rushing back into her cheeks in a burst of fresh rage. The community board manages this whole ridge. We set the codes. I tilted my head, enjoying the unraveling process. Funny, isn't it? Because according to the official registry, I don't just live on the ridge, I am the ridge. Reynolds frowned, reading another page. These signatures are authenticated, Ms. Vance. The deed is original and verifiable. Ma'am, if this is accurate, you have been the one encroaching on his private property, and so have the residents you've been policing under the guise of an association. The clearing went silent. Even the curious onlookers who had crept out onto their porches went still. Eleanor's voice thinned to a terrifying whisper. No, that simply can't be. I stepped even closer, so only she could hear the full weight of my words. You called the county authorities on the man who owns the very dirt you're standing on. She tried to regain her composure, straightening her spine, that pride refusing to die. I don't care about your ancient paperwork. This land answers to our council. We set the codes. We decide who stays. Her voice cracked on the last word. Reynolds finally sighed, clearly done with her stubborn defiance. Council bylaws do not supersede county titles, ma'am. You are on Mr. Harrison's ground. A ripple of audible gasps moved through the crowd watching from the distance. They were realizing that every fine, every threat, every obnoxious little rule Eleanor had imposed for years might have been built on nothing but a bluff. Desperation twisted her face. You don't understand. I've been running this place for 20 years. If this gets out, I'm finished. That was my cue for the final flourish. I pulled out my phone and accessed the digital deed on the county registrar's website, showing the screen to the rangers, but holding it high enough for everyone to see the title. Actually, Eleanor, I said, my voice carrying now, firm and cold. You're not just finished with the HOA. You might be gaining a court date. The younger ranger's radio crackled again, a final impersonal voice confirming the verification. Ownership confirmed. All listed parcels, covering the entire Oak Haven Summit tract. Local authority, including any non-governmental associations, is hereby revoked. Eleanor stumbled back, her eyes wide with a manic terror. No, that's not right. You can't own it all. It is right, I confirmed, my gaze steady. And your little empire just collapsed. Her scream tore through the mountain air, a sound of pure, impotent rage. She lunged at me, trying to claw the phone from my hand, but Sergeant Reynolds caught her firmly by the arm. That's enough, ma'am, he said. By now, half the town had spilled out of their cabins, cell phones raised, capturing the moment their self-appointed tyrant was finally being restrained. And then someone from the crowd yelled out, Hold on! If he's the real owner, where in God's name did all the dues we paid her go? The murmurs swelled into a tide of disbelief and fury. Eleanor spun toward them, shaking. Don't believe him! I kept this place safe. Without me, it would have been chaos. I chose that moment to unfold the absolute final proof. A large, weathered topographic map, the 1950 county seal still visible in the corner. This isn't just a claim, I announced, letting my voice resonate across the clearing. My great-grandfather purchased these forests before any of you built here. Eleanor has been running her pretend council and collecting fees for what? 20 years? On family land. The younger ranger looked grimly at Eleanor. Ma'am, if that's accurate, you've been collecting financial contributions under false authority. That is clearly fraud and criminal misrepresentation. Eleanor froze, the fight draining out of her. I leaned in one last time, making sure she heard me. You wanted to erase me, Eleanor. But you're the one about to vanish. Her face went pale as the rangers exchanged a look. Reynolds finally delivered the final blow. Miss Vance, we'll need you to come with us for questioning, she shrieked, jabbing a desperate finger toward me. You can't arrest me. I run this place. He's just some drifter. But her protests were drowned out by the eruption of the crowd. You took $2,000 from me for that fake dock permit, a man shouted. You threatened to shut off my water for being 3 days late on your beautification fee, a woman wailed. The crowd erupted, cornering the very neighbor they had feared for so long. As the younger ranger snapped the cuffs on her wrists, a satisfying click, her eyes, cold and full of venom, locked onto mine. You'll pay for this. Harrison, she spat, using my last name like a curse. I simply stepped off the porch, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "No, Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice soft yet firm. "The only thing I'm paying for now is peace. Something you stole from this community for a very long time." Applause rose, mixed with the excited flashes of cell phone cameras recording the downfall of the self-appointed warden. But as the rangers guided her toward the vehicle, Eleanor kicked at the gravel one last time, shouting a final chilling sentence. "You don't get it. I wasn't the only one. You think I built this scheme alone?" I looked past them, toward my cabin, the evening sun finally painting the treetops gold. I tightened my grip on the deed. I knew this was far from over. Eleanor Vance was a pawn, a gatekeeper. If someone empowered her to run this decades-long fraud on my family's land, I wasn't just a landowner anymore. I was the man who was going to uncover every name, every crooked official, and every co-conspirator behind the Oak Haven Summit Association. "We dig," I told the younger ranger, my gaze fixed on the quiet, weary faces of the townsfolk. "We dig until we find every last one of them. No one cheats a man on his own soil." And as the wind rippled through the pines, I knew I had just traded a quiet summer renovation for a long, dirty legal war. So tell me, when a small community is being manipulated, do you think it's usually one bad apple like Eleanor, or is it always a deeper network of corruption? And for those of you who've dealt with a tyrannical HOA, how far would you go to expose a lie this big? Drop your thoughts, your experiences, and your HOA horror stories in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you want to follow along, because the search for Eleanor's partners is just getting started.